This is San Antonio, and this is Austin. At 1.5 million and 993,000 residents, respectively, they're both among the top 15 largest cities in the US, and also some of the fastest growing. Despite being located only about 80 miles away from each other, they are two very different cities. However, what most people don't realize is that the gap between them is slowly disappearing. In fact, this region is growing so fast that San Antonio and Austin are slowly merging into one giant urban area. Something that looks less like two separate cities and more like the beginning of another Dallas-Fort Worth-style metroplex. This may sound dramatic, but the numbers are hard to ignore. Austin is currently the fastest growing metro area in the country, while San Antonio had the fourth largest numerical population increase between 2023 and 2024. In between them, suburban communities like New Braunfels, San Marcos, and Kyle are also exploding in population, turning what used to be empty spaces into a continuous chain of development along the I-35. By 2050, the region is expected to grow from 5.3 million to 8.3 million residents, more than Dallas-Fort Worth has today. But to understand what's actually happening here and why these two different cities are being pulled together, we need to look at how they were built, how they're expanding, and what this means for the future of Central Texas. San Antonio is the older city by far. Founded in 1718, it expanded long before cars or American-style suburbs existed. Throughout the 1900s, the city kept annexing land outward, eventually becoming one of the largest city limit footprints in the country. At 504 square miles, it is twice as large as Chicago, despite it having 1.2 million fewer people and 10 times larger than San Francisco. Over time, the constant outward growth has developed in all directions, including north, the same direction Austin is coming from. Austin's growth story is quite different. For most of its history, it was a relatively small government and trading center. But starting in the late 20th century, companies like IBM, Motorola, and Dell began establishing their presence, which led to Austin emerging as a tech hub. This fueled a rapid in-migration of tech workers and students, which turned it into one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. The growth only accelerated heading into 2000s, especially during the pandemic when remote work became the norm. Many startups and tech giants like Apple, Tesla, and Oracle also either expanded or relocated major operations to the area. In fact, Austin held the title as the fastest growing metro area in the US for 12 consecutive years up until 2024. However, as a result of this rapid growth, housing prices began skyrocketing. Because of this, more and more people have started moving to the suburbs where homes are more affordable. And much of the growth has been in suburbs to the south of the cities like Kyle, San Marcos, and Buda. Kyle, for example, was the second fastest growing city in the country in 2024, and now has a population of roughly 70,000, a 52% increase since 2020. San Marcos is also among the fastest growing cities in the country. It's home to Texas State University and sits conveniently right in between Austin and San Antonio, making it an attractive destination for both students and commuters. Closer to San Antonio, there's New Braunfels, which is also growing extremely fast. Its population is approximately 122,000 in 2025, up 35% since 2020. Basically, the corridor along the I-35 is growing so fast that in just a few years, it will form a continuous stretch of developed land. This isn't just about how the growth is shaping the area, but it's also starting to function like a single interconnected region. For example, thousands of people now commute between the two cities every day. Studies show that about 3% of Austin's workforce, or over 24,000 workers, live in San Antonio. Others live in Kyle or San Marcos for the cheaper housing prices, and split the difference, taking jobs in both cities depending on what pays more. Major companies have noticed this too. Instead of choosing one city over the other, many are building new distribution centers and logistics hubs right along I-35. In San Marcos, for example, Amazon, which is already the largest employer in the city with their SAT2 fulfillment center, is currently developing a 1 million square feet delivery station that is expected to bring 1,000 more jobs to the region. However, explosive growth like this always comes with challenges. The undoubtedly biggest issue is traffic. The entire Austin-San Antonio corridor is built around a single interstate, and that interstate is failing to keep up. Portions of I-35 now carry more than 140,000 vehicles per day, comparable to some of the worst road segments in Dallas or Houston. It's especially problematic for trucks because it connects major freight routes from southern border crossings up through the central US. According to a 2022 study, the stretch of I-35 from US 290 to Texas 71 in Austin had the worst traffic for truckers in Texas. Because this is already a big issue and almost guaranteed to get worse, both local and state governments are working on solutions. In Austin, TxDOT has launched one of the largest infrastructure initiatives in the state's history, called the I-35 Capital Express Project. It includes adding additional lanes, redesigning interchanges, and implementing toll-managed lanes to help reduce congestion. However, critics argue that adding more lanes will simply encourage more people to drive and ultimately worsen congestion rather than fixing it. For instance, the expansion of Houston's Katy Freeway added multiple lanes in the 2000s, but within a few years, traffic levels rebounded, and in some areas even became worse than before. We all know that Texas as a whole is very car-dependent, and the lack of alternatives only makes traffic worse. Austin and San Antonio each have their own separate transit systems, but there's almost nothing connecting them. Well, you can take the Amtrak long-distance train, but it only runs once per day and takes basically twice as long as driving. There have been proposals for a commuter-style passenger rail connecting the two cities, but none have advanced beyond the feasibility study phase. However, as the region is growing rapidly, a true regional transit system is becoming increasingly necessary, and it's something we could realistically see take shape in the future. When it comes to the housing market, it's hard to predict how prices will develop. At the moment, median home values are actually decreasing in both Austin and most of the suburbs along I-35, and houses are spending longer time on the market. But that doesn't necessarily mean things are becoming more affordable. What's happening instead is a correction after years of rapid, unsustainable price growth. Even with the recent slowdown, home prices in cities like San Marcos, Kyle, and New Braunfels are still significantly higher than they were just a few years ago. And as more people move into the corridor, demand is expected to remain strong. All of this shows that the Austin-San Antonio corridor is evolving really fast. What was once two separate cities is slowly merging into what might become America's next great metroplex. However, challenges are already emerging, and how the region decides to address them will determine its future. Thank you for watching.